Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on the hottest day of the year, for what I'm sure is going to be the hottest event on the hottest day of the year. We have a fantastic panel. We're talking about a really important issue. I'm also quite liking this silent disco thing. I haven't done it before, and I quite like the notion that if we bore you, you can just tune into LBC or something. But please don't, because we're not going to be boring. This is going to be a really, really interesting issue, because we're going to be talking about regional energy master planning. It is a hot topic that's becoming more and more important and more salient and more nuanced with every conversation that I have about it. We have a very strong panel to discuss it today. Before we come to the panel, quick intro. First of all, myself, I'm Aaron Gould. I'm the CEO of a trade association called ADE. We represent a demand-led energy system that relies on smart assets like heat networks, thermal storage, and all sorts of other systems and facilities that can optimize the energy system to deliver the most cost-effective pathway to net zero. Regional energy planning is a crucial part of that. Oh, sound's just gone weird. Can you all still hear me? Good. Okay. Yes, regional energy planning is a crucial part of that. It's going to have impacts on where distribution lines go, where generation and storage goes, and it creates opportunities for consumer-led flexibility, which can allow us to optimize the energy system and lower bills. The playing field is quite diverse. We have the National Energy System Operator, which is very well versed in networks at a national scale, and now it's starting to work with local areas to draw in local data so that there is a connection between local needs and national planning. We have dozens of local authorities who've been developing local area energy plans since before it was cool. And we have energy companies who are getting creative about the innovative market solutions that are going to be needed to support this transition. And in the last 6 months, we've seen the emergence of policy for heat network zoning, regional energy strategic planning, and the local power plan, all of which are looking at this local drive, this local what's the word? Not ideology. This local generation of ideas. But none of them actually make any reference to each other, which leaves me, for one, wondering, how does this whole framework actually hang together? What does it mean for the people who are actually delivering this on the ground, at the coalface, so to speak? And we can ask for a more qualified panel of experts. So I will let them introduce themselves. So starting on my left and working our way down the line, can you please tell us who you are, where you're from, and tell us something, the best or worst example that you can think of national planning and local planning failing to connect? You can interpret that question as broadly as you like.
Thank you very much. So hopefully everyone can hear me as well. I'm Susie Leppard. I am Renewables and Energy Margins Director at OVO, a domestic retailer serving about 4 million customers in the UK. And we are on a mission to power human progress with a clean, affordable energy for everyone. What that means for us is that the energy transition needs to cleaner, cheaper, greener energy for everyone. My role is focused on looking after our power purchase agreement business. So we work with generators across the UK of all shapes. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I can't hear myself, so we're going to keep going. So we work with renewable generators of all shapes and sizes, as I said. That ranges right from 100 kilowatt hydro schemes that have maybe been embedded in their communities for decades at this point, up to larger scale solar farms and wind projects that have been built in the last couple of years. And I guess a really good example I want to call out of the type of project that I think really works for communities here in the UK is one that we worked on recently with North Ayrshire Council. North Ayrshire built 2 solar parks. I believe they were the first Scottish local authority owned solar farms to be built. And they were built on old landfill sites. So brilliant land use. They are generating revenue for that local authority to reinvest in their communities. And they're selling that power to OVO through one of our extra investment PPAs, which allows them to deliver that revenue and also obviously delivering towards their climate goals. So a brilliant single example of I think local authorities and public and private sector working together. But the interesting challenge that I'm keen to kind of get into on this panel and hear from others on as well is how we make that model more scalable and flexible across the UK to deliver the kind of growth that I think we all aspire to.
Amazing. Thank you, Susie. Moving down the line.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Kerr. I am the Energy Systems Lead at Oxfordshire County Council and have previously been at SSEN in the DSO and strategic planning. In my role at Oxfordshire County Council, I'm in the Climate Action Service. There's about 16 of us. We cover a broad range of things. I'm very much looking at the energy system. So I don't deliver projects like solar farms. That sits in our property and assets team. I'm working on local area energy planning, engaging with NISA on regional energy strategic planning, and starting to think about how we work on the heat network coordination requirement that's coming, local power plan, all of these things. Just for a bit of context, we are a 2-tier local authority setup at the moment. So we have a county council and we have 5 district councils. So we are the Highways and Transport Authority and the Waste Disposal Authority, to give you an idea of some of our remit. Our district councils are responsible for planning, so local plans. We also have strategic planning that tries to bring that all together. We are in the process of looking at local government reorganisation, so we won't exist in this 2-tier structure in a couple of years, but I hope that context helps in that we're actually working in a lot of uncertainty with a number of different local authority stakeholders in one geography, but we do work very well together. In response to your first question, Aaron, I just wanted to give a couple of local examples of where things don't always work, but where things have turned around and worked for us in terms of energy planning. We have issues where we have a requirement, or our district councils have a requirement to build certain numbers of housing every year through their local plans. And at the moment, we've got such massive issues with grid constraints. We can't build the housing within the timescale. And what that leads to is windfall sites. So other housing being built, not part of that strategic plan. We've also very recently had an issue where we can't build out on housing because not only can we not get the power for the housing, but we need sewage treatment works to expand to meet that. And the sewage treatment works are behind the housing in the connections queue, but need to be ahead of it. And so that first come, first serve issue on the demand side is causing huge issues. But we are rectifying this, and this is where this is working. The energy transition isn't about technology. It's about governance. It's about bringing people together. And we're really well placed in local government to bring stakeholders together to sort this. We've now got to a situation where a 12-year delay in what the sewage treatment works needed is now just a 1-week delay by bringing stakeholders together, including the network operators and the developers and everyone together to work our way through this. And I think this is an example of what regional planning is going to enable us to do. It's about putting people in the right place and building that governance and enabling ourselves to be effective for delivery.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And finally.
Hi there. I'm Sam Tickle. I work at the National Energy System Operator, specifically on our regional energy strategic planning function. So for those of you who don't know NESO, we're an independent public corporation who work at the centre of the energy system and are really trying to bring a whole system lens to the planning space. So a key part of this is for regional energy strategic plans, which I mentioned, and we'll be producing 11 of those, one in Wales, one in Scotland, and 9 in the English regions. So to answer Aaron's question, we're an optimistic bunch here at NESO, so I'm going to flip the question slightly and go for a positive example. So I've been in this space since about 2021, and one of the examples that really struck with me was Bridgend City Borough Council. They were one of the pioneers of local area energy planning. And at the time, they really wanted to bring new technologies and new approaches to Bridgend in order to create a sustainable future for the people who live there. And what they did as a result of their leap is they managed to gain investment from a Japanese manufacturer to build a green hydrogen demonstrator project, one of the first in the UK. And it really demonstrated to me the value of having a big and a bold vision to regional planning. And I thought that was brilliant. So I also couldn't help but do a second point on this one, so apologies, Aaron. I think that, one of the downsides of planning as we currently see it is that there hasn't really been a consistent way of turning local needs into coordinated energy decisions. I think that we've all seen the impacts of this patchwork across GB, and that's one of the areas that RESP is really trying to reflect and key to our mission to achieving a sustainable future for GB. So I'll leave it there, and I'm sure we'll explore that more in the panel.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's really interesting. There are some common threads emerging already. Sam talks about the inconsistent way that the planning occurs, and Susie talked about the replicability of the success that you've seen. And Sarah, it sounds like your answer to that, not wanting to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like governance is the key thing that is potentially part of the answer to that question. So it's really interesting. I think let's start with a first proper question, getting into what is the problem that we're trying to solve or the opportunity we're trying to seize. I'm going to start with Sam on this one. Can you elaborate for us why regional energy matters in a national energy system?
Yeah, definitely. So, as evidenced in Regen's recent report on investing in places, we found that adopting a place-based approach to low-carbon investment could deliver twice the social and economic benefits for a third of the cost compared with a uniform delivery across GB. So, I think the value case is clear. I think the question is how we get there. So, taking a regulatory angle on this, a key consideration is risk and uncertainty. It always has been, and we want to move faster. But how do we de-risk the process to enable these benefits to be realised at a local level? So I think there's so many different actors in that space. And I think Ofgem as the regulator here really has to consider how they're going to balance this progress that everybody wants to see with the impact of bills. And that only is becoming more astute and more important as we go through. Alongside this, we also have a GB picture. And what I really see is trying to balance that against what is an increasingly ambitious and vocal local sector here is really what we're trying to do. It is really the opportunity that we have is pulling all of those together. And really, if we are able to do this, what we will be able to do is de-risk that investment, make sure that, as Sarah talked about there, some of the constraint issues that we're seeing across our system can be resolved, and we can move to a world where all of these actors are working together in a coordinated, place-based way.
Thanks so much, Sam. And there's 2 points there that I think I'd like to dig into. So you talked about benefits for the community and for investment. So I was wondering if, Sarah, if you care to share your views on the benefits of the community, and Susie, your thoughts on benefits from a commercial perspective. Sarah first.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and this is really important because the transition is all about people and place. This isn't about just system optimization. This is about bringing the infrastructure that is needed for people to go about their lives in the right way. And doing this at a local and a regional level helps that so much more, because if you don't coordinate and bring this together, it's not going to be a fair and just transition. You actually have to design for that. And this is where local government is absolutely crucial for this. I've already talked about the fact that we shape place through planning, but we're also conveners of people. We have the people services. So we have all the adults and children's services. And we are that interface between what needs to happen nationally and what needs to happen on the ground, and we can convert that. And it's really important that people are part of this transition. I mean, that's what the local power plan is trying to bring about, but it's how we do that. And a top-down approach is not going to achieve that. So there's a real important role for local government in this transition to ensure that people genuinely benefit from this. But I'm not sure how many people are aware of this, and I just assume everyone knows this, but I'm surprised by how many people don't. This is a discretionary role that local government plays. We have no statutory duties around energy, around climate or anything. And with budgets being cut and more focused on statutory, there's less and less of this. And at the moment, local authorities are being asked to help shape this architecture to get that community benefit for people. But we are not sort of given the ability, the empowerment to do that. So I just want to leave that to reflect on for a moment.
I knew it was a discretionary role, but I don't think I'd really thought through the consequences of that. Because, sorry, I'm going to go a little bit off the plan here, because I actually want to dig into that and understand it a little bit better. Because in a RESP area, there's going to be on average around 40 local authorities. I haven't actually done the calculations, but if you divide up the total authorities by number of RESP areas, there's going to be, I think, 6 local authorities on each RESP board representing those 40 areas. So is the implication that the local authorities representing the entire region may not necessarily have the input and the data and the insight from across the entire area, because some local authorities may choose not to engage?
It's a risk. I think what we're seeing from local authorities is, while this is discretionary, if we don't get involved, our areas are going to suffer. They're going to suffer from a fair and just transition. They're going to suffer economically. They're going to suffer from a growth perspective because the infrastructure is going to be much slower to catch up. So there is a recognition. The problem is, though, local government hasn't had to think about energy in this way. It's not been something that's needed to be considered from a planning perspective because you build and you put in your connection request. We've not had to think about it. So it's not in our DNA. I'm the energy systems lead at Oxfordshire County Council. There are not many local authorities that have a me, and that's something to reflect on as well. And a lot of my work is corporately navigating this at the moment to ensure it's seen as a corporate priority so that when we have forums with NESO, I can actually take my head of strategic planning because she knows it's worth her time in a very busy diary. But most local authorities are not in that position yet, I should add. They've got quite a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, going back to the benefits, Susie, you were going to tell us a bit about what you think the commercial benefits are from regional planning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually will kind of take this from a consumer angle as well, because one of the things that I think we all kind of understand is that in the long term, that transition towards renewables, getting more renewables onto the grid, making smarter use of that renewables, driven by consumer flexibility, driven by kind of local supply matching, will lower bills for consumers in the long term. But the investment needed to get to that is material and it is impacting consumers today. And so maintaining consumer support as we go through that transition, in my view at least, is the whole ballgame. Like we cannot get to the end point without taking consumers with us along the journey. And so I think there is a real role for local projects, community-led projects in helping consumers to feel that benefit of the renewable transition today. So a really good example of that, a project we work with is a wind turbine built in Bristol, which is also my hometown, which is 100% owned by the local community. And so all of the benefit, all of the profit from that project is being invested in that local area. And it got complete unanimous support from the local community in terms of planning. They feel very invested in that wind turbine. They feel like it is delivering for them today. And I think that angle and making sure we can come up with models that deliver that local benefit quickly is really, really critical. And from a commercial perspective, thinking about how we can supply that energy locally to consumers so that they can feel that value, I think it's a real key to kind of unlocking this transition as we go forward as well.
Why is it working better in some places, like the examples you've just given, and other places are struggling? Because presumably if it was working that well everywhere, we wouldn't need RESPs, we wouldn't need new regulations, it would just be happening. Absolutely.
And I think a big part of the answer to that is individual perseverance and kind of willingness to get through what are some quite material hurdles. That project in Bristol took about 10 years to get over the line, but having unanimous support from its local community. So I think we are very reliant at the moment, and I think Sarah touched on it as well, in some local authorities having the capacity to invest in these type of things, in some communities having the expertise and the ability to take these things forward. But actually standardizing that approach and convening those people, it potentially is an interesting role that GB Energy and through the local power plan are thinking about as well, and kind of bringing that consistency across the market that we could different regions, I think is really important.
Thank you. Okay, that's really interesting. And then staying on the subject of what's working, what's not working, Sam, from the experience you've seen so far, from the engagement and from the various different, we've heard there's multiple actors involved in this, and communities don't have a voice other than via the local government who are representing 40 local governments in the area. What are you seeing that is working well and what's not working well, and what makes the difference?
It's a really good question, thank you. And I think the key to this, the starting point really is to say that I think the ambition is there. I think we can see that across all the areas across GB. I think that it's certainly true that there are different levels of kind of resource and commitments around these. I think that, what we're starting to increasingly see is that, clusters of best practice and people are really learning from each other and pulling all of that great bit together. I think that REST will also be key to that, and really trying to ultimately provide that space to coordinate lots of different people, get all those views heard, and provide an opportunity for those who potentially were not considering it currently to have a think. And I think I did just want to come back briefly on the point around kind of how do we make sure that everybody is included in this process, and how are they kind of pulled into account. I think that if you look at the current approach that the distribution network operators take on their sort of engagement with local authorities, There are examples of local authorities who don't engage with the DNOs, and I think a key reason for that is exactly as Sarah's articulated, that they don't currently have the knowledge or the expertise or the person. I think that one of the things that RESP is trying to do is introduce local actor support to try and increasingly give a space for us to provide some of that information to those that are not so close to the process, and recognise that at the moment we might have kind of a space for everybody to get involved, but we certainly don't have a kind of an equitable way to make sure that the barriers are removed for them to be able to do so.
Thanks, Sam. There's a few things there that sort of echoes of things that have worked well in the past. Talked about people learning from each other, and I think where LEAPs, local area energy plans, have been successful, it's where local authorities with fewer resources have learned from those who have gone before. So I think that concept of sharing the learning and creating the platforms to creating the spaces where the learning can occur is a really good notion. Then alongside this, we've got RESPs, and we've got also heat network zones and local area energy plans. And as I said in the intro, they're all different things from a central government perspective. And yet from a local authority perspective, they are going to be very closely linked. And for local authorities with fewer resources, probably, I might be overstepping here, but I would speculate that it's often going to be just the same individual who's responsible for all of these different areas. So I'm not sure. This question is directed at everyone, whoever wants to go first. So what is the risk and the opportunity that exists here?
Shall I go first? And I can talk about what we're doing in Oxfordshire as an example. And I will say it again, this is down to governance. So I lead the programme on local area energy planning. And I also just want to just take a step back on what we mean by success of local area energy plans. I think a lot of success has been seen in the completion of the evidence base, but how many are actually being delivered, I think is another question. And it's making sure that when local areas are actually developing these, they're setting themselves up to actually deliver and make change rather than just have a plan that sits on a shelf, which some of them have ended up being, unfortunately. What we did when we started our process of local area energy planning, it's come out of our climate action framework, and that's what's driven it. But it's actually our housing and growth fund that's paying for it. So we're not putting all our eggs in one basket there. But we set up a governance structure that is enabling us to work on these other areas that you're talking about. So while, yes, I am the one leading this, I'm not leading on it on my own, and I do have that safety net there. So our governance, we actually have what's called the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee. So I've mentioned we've got 5 district councils and a county council. So all the place directors sit on a board that we have. And in addition to those, we also have our network operators. So we are actually covered by 3 distribution network operators. We've got SSEN, we've got UK Power Networks, and we've got National Grid Distribution. We also have NGET, the transmission network operator, sit on there. NESO sits on there. We've also got the Greater South East Net Zero Hub. And we also have Low Carbon Hub. And if you've not heard of Low Carbon Hub, please look them up. Barbara Hammond, who set that up, brilliant. They're based in Oxford, and they work with our 50 plus community energy groups. And so they're absolutely integral to make sure this is a just and fair transition. And the entire programme was set up with all of those people. So they all signed off on this. So they all have skin in the game. And we have an operational board as well. Now, this was set up for local area energy planning. We've now morphed it. We now talk about regional energy strategic planning in there as well. And we're starting to bring in heat network discussions as well. So that actually it's not just one person in an organisation trying to bring it all together. On our operational board, I should also point out we bring in all our planners as well to that conversation. So we're trying to make it much more about the organisation. And we're trying to use that best practice and work with the other local authorities in our RESP region. We're trying to convene them to work out how we're going to have our governance outside the NESO governance so we can interact as a sector effectively to ensure place is front and centre of this energy transition.
Thanks very much. And Sam, we touched on it very briefly before we even came onto the stage, but this issue of RESPs and heat network zoning being similar, if not the same thing at local government level, but being completely different institutions at central government level with DESNZ responsible for heat network zoning and NESO responsible for RESPs. What are your thoughts on how the two things can complement / antagonize each other?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think that, those who have been close to the heat network space as well have seen that essentially they were kind of a front leader in this space there was a need for a solution in the heat networks area, and therefore DESNZ kind of pushed ahead to establish the zoning. But if anything, I would see it as a template for RESPs. I would see it as, really how can we harness some of the learning of how the heat network zoning proposals have been delivered, how the roles of local authorities have been included in those, and also kind of really having that delivery front and center in terms of the results that they're aiming to achieve. So in that respect, I would say that really they should complement each other. I think that the one thing that NISO is very mindful of saying is that, we're not the silver bullet in this debate. We're not the people who are going to solve this. We're playing a key role in coordinating and bringing together kind of a whole energy system vision for GB as part of our strategic energy planning. But there will always be various different areas that we need to consider as part of that. And I think that what I found really encouraging in the time I've been in NISO is how open DESNZ and Ofgem have been to engaging with us. We really are key to those discussions. We're involved early and we're forming our own views on this. And I think we'll only see this cooperation and this partnership evolve and get better as we go through.
Thanks so much. And yeah, completely agree. Cooperation partnership is got to be at the heart of this. There's so many different parties involved. Susie, a slightly different question for you, if that's okay, but staying on the theme of what works well and where are the challenges. What are the commercial structures that are available for distributed energy projects today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess this very much depends on the scale of project you're talking about. So the larger scale projects are pretty well served in this space. I guess you can look at things like the Contract for Difference scheme, which is obviously government led, which is a good option for larger projects. There's also a kind of growing corporate PPA market, which works well for areas with kind of industrial demand, where you've got large energy users who want to sign long-term contracts with renewable generators in order to kind of secure their supply. That also provides a really good long-term revenue stream for those larger scale renewable projects. Where I think you get to the more challenging space is with these smaller scale, particularly community-led. Sometimes these are the kind of local authority-led projects, particularly in that kind of sub 5 megawatt scale, where there really isn't a good commercial option, or at least there's not an easy commercial option out there for those projects. They can't get a government subsidy of any type, and so they are reliant purely on the kind of market, the competitive market, to provide them with a commercial offer. One of the things that we've done at OVO is we've stood up a product called our Extra Investment PPA, which serves that market. So that is a PPA funded by customers who choose a green product, and it allows us to really directly show them that the money they spend on a green tariff is being invested in new renewable energy projects. And that's something that is kind of aiming to fill that gap in the smaller end of the market. But when we talk to those developers, particularly those smaller scale community projects, there are two things that come up all the time that they need to make these projects work. The first is long-term price security. That is the real key that we don't currently have from a policy perspective, and that is hard to kind of drive in the market for these smaller projects. The other thing that comes up all the time is some sort of local supply model that they can use with their local community. I think that is something that a lot of projects aspire to, is why can't I just sell this power to the houses down the street? Why is that not possible? The explanation of why that's not possible would take us an hour probably, but it is far too complicated. The market we have is not structured in a way to make that straightforward for people. There are a number of things that are kind of working through the system to try and unlock that. But I think if there were two things that government that we could look at that would really unlock some of this local supply from a commercial perspective, it's those two areas that we need to think about.
Thanks so much. The local supply model is a really interesting one, because I believe that looking ahead to 2029 and the next general election, some potential future leaders have a view that we can make things local in that way. That if you can source the energy locally, then you can use it locally, and that solves the problem. Do you want to get? You said we'd be here all day. Do you want to give us maybe like the 3-minute version of why it doesn't work in practice?
Well, I think the thing that the sector has not managed to do is prove the financial value of that local supply. So it sort of feels intuitive that if you can get consumers local to the projects to use that power at the time that the renewable project is generating, that should be a cheaper model than selling it into the grid to then sell to somebody 100 miles away. But actually proving that is very difficult. And I think if there are projects and there are innovation trials looking to do exactly that. If we can unlock a kind of view of what that value is, then there are policy levers that you can pull to kind of share that value between consumers and generators. But at the moment, the models that exist are too broad, they're too national, and so they are open to a lot of exploitation from different kind of models. And the small scale project, the complexity involved with getting over the line just makes it very difficult for communities to get the engagement they need from the market.
And the commercial support for as a community scale over the last 10, 15 years, there have been various government-led schemes that have come and gone to try to support local investment and community activity in this space. The latest iteration of which is probably what's in the local power plan, and it wasn't part of what we discussed for this. So I have to mind me putting you on the spot, but I bet you've got views on the local power plan.
It's still early days and we're still working out how we respond to that and actually what our role is. I think the advantage we've got is I've already mentioned Low Carbon Hub, and they've been very, very involved in shaping that. Yeah, I think one of the challenges we've got is we don't yet have a strategic authority in place yet through devolved powers, which actually puts us on the back foot slightly. But having said that, we've got such a buoyant community energy sector in Oxfordshire. I'm not sure we would be top of the list anyway for this support, but I was pleasantly surprised when I saw it come out. I think the devil's going to be in the detail. It was very light what got put out, and I'm interested to see how this actually transitions. I think in general, not just the local power plan, but everything we're talking about here today, and it goes back to my previous point on local area energy plans and RESP, it's all about delivery. We're very much talking planning at the moment, but we need to see this delivered in place. And I'm just, chomping at the bit here to move forward. So I'll reserve judgment until we see how it moves forward.
Thank you. And of course, it's interesting. We need to, I think this is sort of a point of clarity when we talk about what's worked well and what hasn't. The difference between local area energy plans is that they've been going on for years. So when Terry is talking about places having plans, but those plans not coming to fruition, I assume we're talking about leaps, whereas with RESPs, we're not at that stage yet, right? We're still, the methodology is due to, am I right? It's still due to be finalised this summer. Sam, do you want to take us through what the timelines are for RESPs?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, when we're talking about RESP, I'm also very conscious that as an industry, we've been talking about them for quite a few years already. As such, I know that expectations are very high, particularly in the value that we need to bring and draw. I think there's a few things to pull out here. Specifically, I think that, RESP sits within a broader ecosystem in NESO, which is part of our strategic energy plans, and we'll have delivered the full suite of these by 2028, which will mean that we have the first kind of strategic energy plan for GB that's ever existed. I think this will be a real major milestone for us as we move through. Particularly, I think that it gives a lot of credibility to the future direction and really seeing how the networks and how Ofgem and DESNZ are going to adapt to that. And I think we're already seeing a lot of positive signals that they will. I think that what I would talk about is kind of some of the areas that we've already introduced. So as you said, we've been publishing and working on our methodology currently, which is kind of the next step in terms of defining the detail of what RESPs are and how they're delivered. But in January this year, we also produced our transitional RESP, and our transitional RESP was really driving at how do we realize some short-term benefits in time for the next electricity distribution price control that's run by Ofgem. And I think that what we are now is we're really at a pivotal moment where I'm almost a bit conscious of saying it's a cliff edge, because I feel like as an industry, we've said we're on a cliff edge for the last 4 years. But I do think that we are kind of at that point now where we do have the opportunity to say, let's start building, let's really move forward, let's start to deliver, let's start to realize the value of what we've been talking about. And I think that the transitional RESP really set the course for us to do that, set the ambition, and now we'll wait to see how that's realized in the price control as we go forward.
Go on, Sarah.
So I just wanted to build and reflect on that a little bit further as well. And you're completely right. We're not actually going to get the first RESP until 2028. It's understanding, though, what we also mean by delivery and success. And it's not producing a plan. It's not, putting stuff into a black box and modelling. It's actually about having outputs which is, in a sense, having an architecture that enables us to genuinely plan for place. To draw on sort of my experiences at local government, I have my decision makers, my politicians asking me, so you've spent the last few years working with the network operators. We already engage with the network operators. We put into their distribution future energy scenarios and we give them data. And we spend time doing that, gathering all this information. But is it making a difference? And at the moment, we can't really say it is. And part of that is the disconnect between the geographies as well. So the network operators, and they'll take the rest from this and they'll talk about, right, so for this grid supply point, these are all the interventions we're going to be making. That means nothing to us in place. I want to know what's happening in Oxford city centre. I want to know what's happening in Bicester. I want to know what's happening in Banbury or in the villages. And there needs to be a translation piece there as well. And how are we actually defining success and delivery? So that's something that needs to be ironed out. We still are very much in a network world and a local government world, and we do need to have a common language, which we just don't have at the moment.
Is this largely, I'll hand back to you, Sam. I want to sort of, is this largely based around the timescales that energy infrastructure investment operates on? That we have these price control regimes. We plan several years in advance, but beyond that, things then develop on that timescale. We are talking infrastructure. We're talking systems that will be in place for generations at a national level. So it takes time. I'm playing devil's advocate here because I don't know what my own feelings on this matter are. But anyway, sorry, Sam, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, just reflecting on that, I think completely agree. And even just personally, I'm not an engineer. I'm more of a policy thinker. I believe in, what's important for place and how we strive forward. But I think that what we can't deny in that is the importance of grid to unlocking those benefits at a place-based level. I think that if we were to really strip back a lot of the reasons why, for instance, areas like local area energy planning have perhaps struggled in delivery, I would say it's because of essentially that the current environment, there's not a lot of trust. There's not a lot of trust about the right direction, what we need to do, and that certainty that we need to invest now. And that's led to cautiousness over the years that we're all seeing the impact of. So what I would really say is that although it is, and I think that, REST will do a lot of those components in terms of translating the benefit, I don't think we should shy away from the importance that we are building credibility on a network level to enable Ofgem as a regulator to fund these projects and to fund these network reinforcement that previously they've perhaps said is too risky.
And there's also a role for private finance in this process as well. So moving the conversation forward a little bit, I think, Susie, I want to ask you, what structures do you think are needed locally and nationally to draw in the sort of private finance that's going to enable the sorts of transitions we've just been hearing about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the key thing on the kind of private financing point is regulatory stability is just absolutely critical in terms of being able to invest with confidence. I think, I touched on it previously in terms of the revenue stack for these projects. We need to get that stability so that people can invest. But I also think there's an area of consistency that we need to drive between that national and local level. I'm not going to reopen the locational pricing debate because I think that one's well settled, but there is we have growing kind of local sim flexibility. We have the kind of plannings that the guys have been talking about. We have all these different kind of elements that need to work together and need to not contradict each other. And what we can't afford is to have national pricing signals for investing in new projects be contradicted by kind of local dispatch signals and flexibility. And so kind of bringing those different things together, I think, is really key in making sure that we have a consistent approach. But yeah, in terms of bringing that private finance in, I think there are really good models that have existed in GB for a long time, and investment in renewables has been consistent in this market for a long time. But the key and the foundation to that has been that kind of regulatory and policy stability that allows for investment. And so I think that continuation and making sure that it all comes back to maintaining that consumer support. Fundamentally, they are the people who pay for this transition, will allow us to kind of maintain that as we move forward.
Thank you. I cannot agree more on the regulatory stability thing. I feel like that for the last 10, 15 years, there's been this sort of on again, off again love affair with subsidy schemes. And it just led to, there are a few, it's slightly off topic, but there are fewer heat pump installers now than there were before the renewable heat incentive. Because if you ask them about it, it's because they thought that they were going to be entering into this growing market, only to discover, oh no, the funding keeps on going up, down, up, down. Now we don't have the stability. It is not a safe career path anymore. And that's concerning. I think that's a That's an analogue of what we're seeing across the board. Staying on the same question then about the structures that are needed locally and nationally to run private finance, Sam, do you want to tell us more about sort of the governance structures that are emerging here?
Yeah, certainly. So within RESP, I think what's really key is that we are putting the power in place for our governance. I think that, what we can see and what I encourage everybody to do is kind of, look at our methodology when it's published and start to consider. But we have kind of a few tiers of structure, but really the main bit is in all of our 11 RESP nations and regions. There will be a strategic board, which was discussed earlier, which will be ultimately have the power to do a vote on RESPs at the end. And they'll be supported by a series of working groups, which will essentially be open for applications. There will be an industry one, a transport one, for instance, a few different areas. And really it's about harnessing and pulling all of that information in. I think that, and where my perspective on this comes in is how we balance the top down and the bottom up. So how we think about how this translates into ambition on a GB level, and also potentially where there is misalignment, how we go to resolve that misalignment. And I think that the governance arrangements that we've put in place are designed to really tease out some of that debate and really make sure that when we do publish a REST plan, it's one that has buy-in from the local area, but also one that's going to be accepted on a GB level and by DES as an Ofgem. I think that maybe just to go even a bit more abstract on this, I think that we're an unusual team in NISO. I think we're a very vocal team. We really like debate and kind of for people to challenge us and for things to be structured. I think that we're not kind of very traditional engineering based. And I think that because of that, I would really say that RESP is very open to listen. We're very open to challenge. I think that I would encourage everybody to come and speak to us and see kind of what the governance that we're putting forward can do for you and how you can get involved.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sarah, Sam just talked about having this top-down, bottom-up balance and government policy trying to sort of tease that out. To what extent do you think that national policymakers have a good grasp of the local government reality?
Oh,
that's not a loaded question at all.
I mean, we were talking about this earlier. One of the challenges we have is, this is coming from DESNES, but we've also got MHCRG, Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So we've actually got these two different strands which aren't necessarily connected up. So we're sort of being pulled in one direction by one and another direction. So there is some more coming together. And as we were discussing earlier, the National Planning Policy Framework consultation for the changes, it now actually has a section on energy systems, which is great. And there's a little bit of a mention of RESP in there, but at the moment it's not clear what feeds what at what point and influences what. So there's still a disconnect. So there's still some work that needs to happen there. I think things are definitely going in the right direction though. And what we're trying to achieve here is incredible. And I don't think we've said it yet. We are the first country to be doing what we're doing. And this is the first time it's ever been done. It's not going to be perfect. It's got to be good enough. There's still some way. And as Sam knows, I do take that challenge on. I'm always feeding back. We had a very long consultation response to the methodology. But we want to make sure that this is genuinely for people in place. Fundamentally though, and I'm going to keep saying this, local government needs to be more than just an input into this process. It needs to be recognised as a core delivery actor. And the problem is you cannot do that based on goodwill alone. So there needs to be a fundamental change. One of the things that we've got so much instability in local government at the moment, and it takes certain people, a change in political ambition, for this to be completely off the table. We're already having to think in the work that we do with our local area energy planning while we're talking about net zero. We are having to dampen things like that down and ensure that we're bringing through all the other benefits that come with this, the growth, the resilience, the fair and just transition and all of that through, so that it stands the test of time, so that whatever happens in the future, it's not just then thrown in the bin. But if we could get some kind of statutory lever or something that properly empowers us to engage with this, it would be so much better.
Fantastic. I think at this point, we'd probably better ask if there's any questions from the audience before we run out of time. So I don't think, yes, one question at the front.
We probably need a mic.
Do we have a roving mic? I'm not sure that we do.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to the next question. Hi guys, I'm Tanya. I'm from the company called Innova. We are optimization software. Thank you very much for a very informative session. We are navigating quite a lot of regulatory environments in our work as well. So I have a slightly perhaps of a guidance question for you. So we're facing quite an interesting situation in the UK where there is a lot of backup capacity in this country. So around 2 gigawatts of storage, which is a backup storage not used for anything apart from backup. There is some CHPs as well, etc. And at the moment, they're not allowed to interact with the grid unless for testing purposes. And this capacity can be easily used for flexibility, future net zero targets, reduction of costs and the price, and you name it. There's so much of that. But the regulatory red tape is just stopping the show. I mean, is there a way to remove that red tape to allow those assets to be interacting with the grid and, dispatch when system is stressed and not be limited to 50 hours of testing, which companies are actually paying for? Sorry for the long question, but thank you.
That's like a detailed question. I know it's a far topic, so.
Yeah, I mean, I won't pretend that kind of I'm an expert on this sort of topic. I think that, what I would say here is I think that there's certainly opportunities to feed those in. And I know that Ofgem as a regulator in the past have also done consultations where they've kind of asked basically for examples of red tape or areas that you think are not necessary in the system. So I would say as well that, try and seek out those opportunities where government and the regulator and NISO are thinking about that, and where there's kind of an opportunity for change, because that'll be your best kind of option.
Maybe that. Give it a different go. There we go. One, you're not alone. That's one example of, I think, a number of places where, as a sector and policymakers, we're not great at finding the 10 small things that would add up to a big change. And so, I think there are a number of examples like that. Alexon are another party that I think are worth engaging with on that topic, because they have the kind of rule book that allows for some of the more subtle changes that might enable some of what you're looking at. But definitely sympathise with the point, and very happy to catch up about it separately as well.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, there's one. Sorry, I'm blinded by the light. There's someone at the back.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really interesting conversation today. I just saw the energy and tech. I was like, let me just, join this session. And it's been really interesting. So I'm an AI researcher, and very interesting because I'm currently working on a research which will be out in August. It's the role local authorities are going to be playing for the National Energy Transition Plan is very critical. And at the early stage of my research work, I'm beginning to see that a lot of investments going into energy projects and all of that are mostly tied to local authorities, that have large populations and are also kind of maybe have the financial capacity. So, but within local authorities, I think that there are also other local authorities that have a lot of industrialized activities, maybe agriculture and different activities going on. Maybe like those investments have already been going on. But is there any kind of connection, let's say, within all local authorities to be able to support, because it's just like everyone is advocating for their own local government, but is there a kind of, coming together to say, okay, we understand that these people are actually underfunded and maybe they need more investments within that area. So if we're talking about national policies not being able to come down, but within the local authorities, are there any kind of synergies like that?
So firstly, let me say, it sounds like an amazing study. I really want to hear more about it. And if you've got the time, I'll catch up with you afterwards.
Sure.
The answer to that question, I think, is something we could probably spend an entire day on, but we won't. I will hand over to Sarah because I think she's more qualified than I am.
Hopefully this mic works. I mean, I don't have all the answers, but there's a lot of networking that happens through structured forums and informal forums within local government, and there's also a lot of support. So a lot of these conversations will happen through the creation of local area energy plans, actually, and the work that goes on there. And we get a lot of support from organisations like the Net Zero Hubs. We have the Greater South East Net Zero Hub that do bring people together and to try and help share those learnings and information that we can support organisations. I mean, you've mentioned different kinds of authorities there. We actually encompass all of what you said in Oxfordshire. So we've got cities, we've got massive industrial. We're part of the Oxcam corridor, which is the Silicon Valley of Europe or whatever it's called now. We've got lots of agriculture as well. We've got part of the Cotswolds. So we encompass all of that, but we do engage with other authorities, as I say, and we've also got an organisation called Adept. We have the Local Government Association. But actually, importantly to this, through the role of that the RESP is bringing, we are doing so much more through that process as well, and it is enabling us to connect in that regard. So even though we don't have those outputs yet from RESP in terms of what they're actually going to be producing, it is giving us other benefits right here, right now, for the kind of things you're talking about.
And I'll add, there's also organisations you might want to reach out to, like UK 100. My company AD does a lot of work with them. They represent about 105 local authorities that are trying to push for action on energy and climate change. There's Climate Emergency UK, which is working with local authorities to try to get them to develop their low carbon plans or their climate mitigation strategies and to hold them to account for delivering against their own targets. Who else there? So I already mentioned Adept, but Adept is part of an informal coalition called the Blueprint Coalition, which has a blueprint for how they think the policy framework should be modernised and adapted to better enable local authorities to deliver on these sorts of goals. So there's a whole army of organisations that are working on towards the same common goal.
I just also say, actually, the network operators as well support us with this, I should point out.
Brilliant. We have 3 minutes left, so I think we've got time for one more question if we make the question and the answers quite quick. Who has the mic to hand to this gentleman in the middle? Thank you.
Hello. Sorry. I'm Chris from LCP Delta. You touched on the overlap between the local area energy plans and heat network zoning and the RESPs. And also the issue with deliverability that leaps, aren't a requirement to fulfill, to deliver on. I wonder then, do you feel like that the importance of leaps is falling away, and they should be not prioritized for those local areas that don't have them yet, or whether they actually need to be enforced more strongly, or to sort of continue with the status quo? Sort of which direction are they going in?
I mean, my answer to that is, sorry, again, I should really hand over to Sarah, but chair's privilege. I would say that it makes them more important than ever. I think it's almost a vindication that, because the government has been a bit ambivalent about leaps since their inception. And I think what we're seeing now is vindication that actually they have tremendous value. Let's not forget that RESPs are regional by design, and by nature, they're not going to go into the same level of granularity as leaps. But where leaps already exist, that is a huge, big first step towards getting together the data and the organizational structure and governance that we need to support leaps. That is my view. Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are really, really important. I mean, we're coming towards the end of the development of our evidence base, which is where a lot of people see as the end of the road. It isn't. We see it as the springboard, the start of how we deliver. And I think the issue has been the delivery gap. You get to that evidence base, how do you then transition into delivery? And that's what we're trying to minimise at the moment. So we're one of the things that we're doing with ours to take it a step further is we've got an organisation in to help us use that evidence base to build a project pipeline and to do an investment strategy for us so we can very quickly move into delivery, having reflected on what others have done. I think part of the challenge is there isn't a requirement, there isn't a standard, there isn't a data standard. What actually is the value of a local area energy plan, or what part of a local area energy plan? We see it as an evidence base and a function, and it's that function bit that's really important. But what's so important for us in having that, it sets strategic direction. It's really hard to get decision makers in local government to agree to quite new and innovative things that we're going to have to do if we don't have a strategic plan to hang it off. And that's where the value of that is. And it helps us prioritise and understand where we're going to focus. I think they are so important. And I would love to see these come through as part of a mandatory requirement that is properly funded, properly supported, but people really understand what they're for. Because I think there's still, we find it even within our stakeholder group, not everyone is clear as to what they are and what they do. And we need to be really clear and defined on that.
We are now out of time, but I do want to quickly give Sam and Susie an opportunity to say any final words, because we haven't done any questions your way for a little while.
Who's got the mics that work? Only that I think with all of this talk about planning and into delivery, I think that is why it is so critical to keep the public, who ultimately pay for all of this, however you cut it, on board as we move through this transition. So a final plea for energy that we can actually make cheaper for consumers in their pockets so that they feel the benefit of the transition as we move through it.
Thank you. And just a short line from me, I think, let's keep working together. Let's stay in touch all the time. We'll get there. That's my last message.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, V6 Connect, for having us. And thank you tremendously to the panel, Susie Leopard, Sarah Kerr, and Sam Tickle. Thank you very much.